1号がキュアお相撲さん、いえ、キュア力士になるところでしたね。
Yeah, sorry, but I don't think he's ever going to be able to top this Rikishi.
Oh, man!
We opened this week with our heroines checking out a mountain of fan letters that they were receiving, and I'm really starting to pity that poor mailman. Cuddy would end up doing his part and organize all the letters to their respective cures, and conveniently enough, they seem to be color coordinated, which, assuming this angle isn't too off, it looks like Nana has the smallest pile. Gee, I wonder why. However, the top of Uta's pile not only had a yellow envelope instead of pink, it also just so happened to be from that one sumo wrestler, Kurikyuta, who's been in the show twice now. Their first encounter was of course only known between Uta and Prune, so they explained it to the others, and how they somehow mistook this dude as a Precure, which, yeah, that's absolutely ridiculous, isn't it?
間違えなくもないですかね。
いえ、かなり無理があるかと。
Tanaka, I'll happily let you take over these videos if you want. Hell, he even went through the trouble of explaining what sumo wrestling was, as apparently he had become a giant weeb for it. Anyway, Kurikyuta's fan letter was your basic fare, with the grown man saying that he was inspired by the teenage idols and would work towards his dreams of becoming a yokozuna. So yeah, it was cheesy, but completely harmless. I mean, I'm sure it's not going to lead to some sort of cheap setup for our heroines to just so happen to run into him later and...
Well, that's just lazy writing.
Also look, another cheap piece fat joke, even though sumo wrestlers are actually quite muscular, and also considering what we'd learn about him later in this episode, it feels like even more of a cheap joke, but more on that later. And speaking of jokes, we were reminded of one of the best ones from the first episode that legit has yet to be topped. Though we did get to learn what happened immediately after that scene.
クリキュータだよ、歌。
クリキュータ。
Okay, not quite as funny as Uta's face, but still a really decent joke. Also, I feel that this Peach's interior is meant to reference Doraemon's time machine. Anyway, after that, he apparently became a fan of the Idol Precure, and even managed to become their 8th member, which, considering how many enrollments they had on their D1, that is pretty damn impressive. I would point out they should be more focused on his sumo training, which is reportedly very intense, but apparently that wouldn't be an issue as he was already considering retirement.
クリキュータ、20歳、体力には自信があります。
Wait, 20? Hold on, let me check something real quick. Alright, sumo wrestler starting age. Most professional sumo wrestlers start with recruits, often joining a sumo stable at age 15, and the average retirement age is early 20s if they fail to reach the top ranks. Okay, kind of checks out. I mean, a part of me did want to call him a quitter, but thinking about it, most combat sports are very physically demanding, and as we'll see, he did have a significant issue that made it understandable why it might have been better for him to consider early retirement. That said, considering that he was also likely a high school dropout, he needed to quickly find a new career path.
アイドルプリキュアになる。
Done! No, you can't leave me. You can't leave me. Get out of my way, damn it! Come on! So yeah, this was going to be the focus of the episode. Now granted, we would avoid a Cure Gorilla moment, thanks sweet baby Jesus. But yeah, if you ever wanted an example of an inconsequential filler, well, here you go. Anyway, Best Boy Tanaka did his part, and thankfully tried to convince this dude that an industry built around very superficial outward appearances wouldn't exactly welcome a big fat guy. Yeah, I know I just said he actually has a lot of muscle, but still, that looks like fat. However, Kurikyuta still wanted to prove that he was idol material by making mochi.
That makes sense to me.
Also, where did they pull that mochi making set plus a ton of cooked rice out of? Nah, whatever. They did show that he was actually quite a good mochi maker, and even a full-on chef, as he made some traditional sumo stew for them. Thus, it was pretty obvious they had at least 2 different choices for career paths, and Kokoro even dropped the most obvious truth bomb. And yet, he still tried to show off his singing and dancing skills, which again, you're not going to be able to surpass the Uso's dad, especially with this little issue. So yeah, while they didn't stay it, I'm good to assume this wasn't his first leg injury. I mean, it only makes sense in a sport where competitors do have to put a lot of pressure on their legs, hence why they do those doskoi exercises to fortify them. And yet, there are those athletes out there who really weren't genetically meant for certain sports. Some of us were just born with weaker legs, thus making us quite injury prone, and as a pro wrestling fan, I've heard a lot of stories of amateurs who just couldn't do it because their bodies wouldn't cooperate, and thus they had to quit before even their first match. Still not saying that this dude should become an idol or anything, but at the same time, they did just establish they could handle a few other occupations that maybe you should consider just going into. They're not going to go with that much better less of the day, are they?
Nope.
Of course not. Yeah, as if on cue, some kid named Chikara, who was his biggest fan, showed up. On a bit of a side note, he was also voiced by Mayuko Kazuma, who I'm really starting to think that they're setting up to become a Precure VA for the next season, which again would be absolutely hilarious if she ends up playing that plus Magia Azure in the same year. Anyway, Kurikuta gave some very sensible reasoning for why he was considering early retirement. Again, they didn't specify how many injuries he's had, but at least this particular one was right before a Dawn promotion exam, being that he'd have to wait a while before the next one, and that's not even factoring how long his leg injury was going to take to heal up. In that time, his skills would likely falter, his fellow stablemates would be promoted ahead of him, and yeah, at that point, retiring and focusing on a new career would make a lot of sense.
餅つくのすっごく楽しそうだったし、ちゃんこ鍋も作ってくれて。
Isn't that all the more reason he should just consider moving on to a different career path? But no, apparently this is an episode that just kind of advocates for peer pressure. I mean, yeah, I get that their hearts are in the right place and everything, but sometimes people just have to consider a different career path. Anyway, Kurikuta became the obvious victim of the week, and Jogi created a monster out of the mochi making set. It also, of course, had a sumo wrestler moveset, which, unfortunately, they didn't take full advantage of this week. Yeah, the monster did some of the traditional moves, but the Precure didn't counter with something similar, like grappling or something that would have been cool to see. We did get some cool bits of animation, mostly from Zukyun Kissed, whilst the original trio were just kind of dropped out.
This right here is bull.
Anyway, after a pretty basic speech about how they wanted to protect Kurikuta's dream, they just kind of went straight to the finisher after barely softening the monster up. With that, they saved Kurikuta, who had apparently seen the Precure perform through the monster's vision. And with that, the episode ended with him deciding to continue being a sumo wrestler, because I'm sure those injuries won't start to pile up like crazy soon. This was yet another very meh episode. I mean, there were a few good jokes here besides the stuff that reminded me of the comedy gold of the first episode. That said, it was clear that this character was more meant for a one-off joke, so bringing him back twice kind of devalues it. I'm not exactly sure who is demanding to bring back this character. I mean, he was clearly meant to be a punchline to an incredibly absurd joke that can only really be told once. And even if they want to flesh Kurikuta out, I don't entirely see the point considering our main cast of characters should be getting a little more development by this point in the series. I don't know, unless they had some more decent jokes to tell beyond the obvious fat guy jokes, this episode just felt like the equivalent of empty calories. I might be a little more forgiving if there was a more unique lesson than just your typical don't give up on your dreams, even when all of the signs say that you should reconsider them. But no, this is just overall a fairly basic filler episode with a fairly basic lesson of the day that I'm personally not a huge fan of. Much like the injured sumo wrestler, this episode just didn't have very strong legs to it. Thanks for watching, and if you want to continue pursuing a dream, in spite of what your doctors might tell you, well, our videos can certainly help you with your little reckless path. Starting next month, we're going to start up some new series, as well as start working on some longer form projects. Look forward to that and Princess Jin Orchestra tomorrow. And until then, though, for now, my friends, and oop, looks like we're starting our dance off. I'm gonna get some cartwheels.